I paid for 236 people to watch my son get married. Then my new daughter-in-law moved my wife and me behind the speakers and whispered, "You're not the host tonight. Martin, you're a guest." 34 days later, she called and asked me for $35,000 toward a townhouse. That was the first time she learned the difference between a quiet father and a weak one. Welcome back to Dad's Slant Justice. If you have ever been treated like a stranger by people who were spending your money, comment where you are listening from and what time it is there, and subscribe to the channel, because sometimes a single click from you helps us bring another story like this to life. My name is Martin Keller. I am 56 years old, and for 32 of those years, I have owned a heating and air conditioning company in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I started with one used van, a toolbox my father left me, and a phone number printed on magnets that barely stuck to refrigerator doors. I have crawled through attics in July and basements in January. I have missed dinners, postponed vacations, and paid men before I paid myself. I did not do it because I wanted applause. I did it because that was the job. You marry the woman you love. You raise the child God gives you. You keep the furnace running. You keep the roof patched. And you do not stand in the middle of the room asking why nobody claps for basic decency. That was how I understood fatherhood. Nobody warned me that people can mistake silence for permission. Our son Caleb was 30 when he brought Sloane Whitaker home. Caleb had always been the kind of kid who could break a lamp and confess before the glass stopped falling. He was honest, soft-hearted, and sometimes too willing to believe that confidence meant character. When he told us he had met someone special, Elaine smiled for 3 days. I smiled too. I wanted my boy happy. That matters in this story, because people later tried to say I never gave Sloane a chance. I gave her every chance a father can give. She arrived at our house on a Saturday in early November, stepping out of Caleb's SUV in a camel coat, high boots, and the expression of someone entering a home she had already priced online. She shook Elaine's hand first, then mine. Her grip was dry and quick. "Sloane Whitaker," she said, "Caleb talks about you constantly. Only the good parts." "I hope," I said. She looked around my living room. At the brick fireplace I had rebuilt myself and the oak bookshelves. Elaine had stained the summer Caleb went to college. "It's so cozy," she said, "like a preserved version of a house." Elaine laughed because Elaine is gracious by reflex. Caleb didn't hear the edge. I heard it. I decided not to keep score. Dinner was pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the apple pie Elaine makes when she wants someone to feel welcome. Sloane complimented the food, asked what cut of beef Elaine used, then explained that her mother had gone mostly plant-based because red meat ages people. Caleb nearly choked on his water. Sloane touched his sleeve and smiled like she had done nothing at all. That smile became familiar. It was not warm. It was polished. It was the smile people use in showroom kitchens, on charity boards, and in photographs where everyone knows the conversation ended 5 minutes ago. She had a way of saying small things that sounded harmless until they landed. By the end of that first dinner, she had called our neighborhood established, our furniture solid, and my company local 3 different times. The proposal came 7 months later. Caleb called from a little overlook above the Monongahela River. Breathless and happy, Sloane had said yes. Elaine cried into a dish towel. I told my son I was proud of him, and I meant it. I asked if they had a date in mind. He laughed and said Sloane already had 3. The wedding planning started before the engagement photos were edited, 2 Sundays after the proposal. Caleb and Sloane came over with a laptop, a white binder, and a level of certainty that made me realize the meeting had already happened somewhere else. Elaine made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Caleb had done multiplication homework and later filled out college applications. Sloane opened the binder. There were color tabs. There were fabric swatches. There were printed estimates. I had run a company for 3 decades, and I know an organized pitch when I see one. "We are thinking Lancaster County," she said. "There is a private estate called Willow Creek Hall. It has a restored stone barn, a courtyard, and a guest cottage for getting ready. It's rustic, but elevated." "How elevated?" I asked. She slid a page across the table. The venue alone was $19,500 for the weekend, not counting food, alcohol, rentals, flowers, music, or the shuttle service she considered non-negotiable because guests should never feel inconvenienced. Elaine looked at me. Caleb looked at his coffee. Sloane looked directly at my checkbook, though it was not on the table. "That's a beautiful place," Elaine said. "It is," Sloane answered, "and it photographs incredibly well." I asked how many guests they were considering. 236. Sloane said. I repeated the number because sometimes a number sounds more reasonable when it has to walk across the room twice. It did not. "How many are from our side?" I asked Caleb. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe 50. 55 if everyone comes." Sloane closed the binder halfway. A soft little gesture that somehow felt like a door shutting. Weddings aren't divided by sides anymore, Martin. They're about the couple's community. "Of course," I said. That was my first mistake. Not because I agreed. Because I let the word "of course" become a down payment on 6 months of nonsense. Money did not leave my account all at once. It left like heat escaping through a crack nobody wants to seal. The venue deposit came first. Then catering. Then bar service. Then a floral designer from Philadelphia who apparently understood Sloane's vision in a way local florists could not. Then the photographer with 2 assistants. Then the late-night pretzel cart, because Sloane said it would make the evening feel authentically Pennsylvania, though she had grown up outside Charlotte and had no interest in authenticity when it was cheaper. Every few days, Caleb would call and ease into a sentence the way a man approaches a dog he is not sure is friendly. "Dad?" Sloane found a better option. "Dad." The first quote didn't include service staff. "Dad." Apparently the chairs in the base package look weird in photos. Each time, I asked the number. Each time, there was silence before the number. By March, I had paid $38,000. By May, 49. By the morning of the wedding, the total would be $63,870. I know the exact figure because I wrote it in a notebook and circled it once, not twice. Once was enough. Sloane thanked me often in those months. But gratitude from her had the texture of a receipt, proof that a transaction had occurred, not evidence that it meant anything. She would touch my arm and say, "We appreciate you so much, Martin." Then turn around and ask whether Elaine could wear a softer color, because navy looked heavy in spring photography. Elaine tried to help with the planning. She suggested white hydrangeas because Caleb's grandmother had grown them by the porch. Sloane nodded and said, "That's sentimental." Then ordered imported garden roses and ranunculus in a shade called faded apricot. Elaine offered to bake cookies for the welcome bags. Sloane said homemade items could raise allergy questions and ordered small jars of local honey instead. Charged to my card. There was also Paige. Paige was Sloane's older sister and maid of honor. Though the word maid did not fit a woman who managed people like she was running airport security, Paige arrived early to every meeting. She translated Sloane's wishes into instructions and other people's suggestions into problems. If Sloane was the queen, Paige was the palace guard with better shoes. The week of the wedding, Sloane's father arrived. Grant Whitaker was a retired wealth manager from Charlotte, North Carolina, though he said retired with the sadness of a man who still checked the market before breakfast. He was tall, silver-haired, and calm in the way of men who expect the room to rearrange itself around them. He wore loafers without socks and a watch that could have paid for every centerpiece twice. He did not offer to pay for the rehearsal dinner. He did not offer to cover the bar. He did not ask what he owed. He arrived in Lancaster, checked into the hotel rooms included in the room block. I had guaranteed, ordered bourbon at the welcome reception, and accepted every ceremonial privilege of fatherhood without touching a single financial responsibility. The rehearsal dinner was at a brick restaurant near downtown Lancaster. I paid for that too. Caleb gave a toast that made Elaine cry. Grant gave a speech about Sloane's ambition, Sloane's beauty, Sloane's remarkable standards, and did not say my son's name until the very end, almost as a destination he had remembered to include. Paige told a story about Sloane reorganizing her dollhouse as a child because the furniture lacked flow. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, though I should have taken it as testimony. Sloane came to me after dessert. She was wearing ivory silk and pearl earrings. Martin, she said, I know this week has been a lot. It has. I want you to know, Caleb and I are grateful. She hugged me. Her perfume smelled expensive and cold. I put one hand lightly on her back and told myself to accept the moment. Maybe I had judged her too harshly. Maybe the pressure of wedding planning had sharpened her edges. Maybe after Saturday, we could all breathe. The wedding day itself was beautiful. I will not pretend otherwise. Willow Creek Hall looked like something built for a movie about old money and second chances. The stone barn glowed in the late afternoon sun. The courtyard had lanterns strung between sycamore trees. The apricot roses Elaine had not chosen were honestly stunning. A string trio played while guests walked in across the gravel path. For 1 hour, even I believed the money had purchased peace. Caleb looked nervous in his navy suit. Before the ceremony, he found me behind the barn where the groomsmen were pretending not to sweat. Dad, he said. Yeah, Bud. He stared at his shoes. Thank you. For all of it, I wanted to make a joke. Something about interest rates. Something about him naming his first child after my accountant. But his eyes were wet. And my son is still my son, no matter who stands beside him. I put both hands on his shoulders. Be a good husband. Be honest when it's uncomfortable. Don't disappear inside someone else's life. He nodded like he understood. Maybe part of him did. The ceremony was short and polished. Sloane looked flawless. Caleb looked like a man seeing the sun rise. Elaine cried quietly. Grant escorted his daughter down the aisle and handed her to my son with the solemn face of a man donating a national monument. I stood beside Elaine and told myself that a father does not get to choose every lesson. Sometimes he only pays for the classroom. Then came the reception. To understand what happened, you need to understand the layout. The barn had one long main room with exposed beams, a dance floor, and a raised gallery at the far end. The gallery held 2 long tables with better lighting and a perfect view of the couple. The venue coordinator later called it family seating. Sloane had called it the visual anchor during planning, which should have warned me. Elaine and I were shown to table 12, near the back corner, between a speaker stand and the hallway to the bathrooms. At first I thought it was a mistake. Then I saw the place cards. Martin Keller, Elaine Keller, Aunt Marjorie, 2 of Sloane's mother's church friends, Grant's golf partner and his wife. I looked toward the raised gallery. Grant sat there. Sloane's mother sat there. Paige sat there. 3 of Sloane's college friends sat there. Caleb's best man sat there. There were candles, large arrangement, and the kind of chairs Sloane had insisted were necessary because the basic ones looked cheap. Elaine saw it at the same time I did. Don't, she whispered. I haven't done anything. You're breathing like the compressor is about to blow. I stood up calmly. I walked to the coordinator, a young woman named Avery, who had been kind every time my card cleared. Excuse me, I said. I think there may be a seating error. I'm Caleb's father. She looked at her tablet. Martin Keller. Correct. Correct. Table 12. I understand that's what the card says. I'm asking whether that was intentional. Her eyes flicked toward the gallery. Then back to me. That tiny movement told me everything. Table 12 is correct, she said softly. I'm sorry. I appreciated the apology because it was the first honest thing anyone had said to me all day. I went back and sat down. Elaine put her hand over mine. Let it go for tonight. I am letting it go. No, you're storing it. She knew me too well. I had nearly convinced myself to survive the evening when Sloane appeared beside my chair. She was radiant. I will give her that. Some people are never more dangerous than when everyone is admiring them. She bent close so only Elaine and I could hear. Martin, she said, I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable back here. We had to keep the family sightlines clean for photos. Tonight is not about who paid for what. You're here as a guest, and I really need you to enjoy it that way. Elaine's hand tightened around her fork. I looked up at Sloane. As a guest, she smiled. Exactly. A loved guest. Then she floated away, white dress trailing behind her, leaving $63,870 sitting in the back corner next to a speaker. I did not stand. I did not shout. I did not embarrass my son. I picked up my fork and ate the salad. It tasted like nothing. Something inside me cooled so completely that I remember the sensation more than the words. Not anger. Anger is hot. This was a valve closing. Caleb noticed. I saw him look over twice from the head table. Once during the first dance. Once during Paige's toast. His face carried the helpless guilt of a man who knows the bridge is cracking but keeps walking because the view is pretty. He did not come to me. I did not go to him. That night in the hotel room, Elaine took out her earrings and placed them carefully on the dresser. She waited for me to speak. I didn't. I brushed my teeth, changed clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. Martin, she said quietly, I'm not going to ruin his wedding. I know. I'm not going to make him choose tonight. I know that too. I opened the Notes app and typed 3 words. Remember table 12. Elaine saw the screen. She didn't ask what it meant. She just turned off the lamp. The morning after the wedding, while Elaine slept and hotel coffee burned my tongue, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my accountant, Denise Morales, who has managed my company books for 14 years and once found a $4,000 billing error by looking at a spreadsheet for 12 seconds. The second was to my attorney, Patrick Sloan, a man with the cheerful voice of a dentist and the instincts of a locked gate. I told them both the same thing. I wanted a full review of every account, deed, beneficiary form, business share, an insurance policy that could ever be touched by Caleb's marriage. I did not say I wanted revenge. I said I wanted protection. Smart professionals understand the difference. Denise said, I'll start Monday. The changes were not dramatic. That is why they worked. My company, Keller Heating and Air, went into a family trust. Elaine became the primary protected beneficiary. Caleb remained included. Because I love my son, and I have never confused him with his mistakes. But any distribution after Elaine and me would be controlled through language Patrick called spousal insulation. In simple terms, what I built for my family could not become marital leverage for someone who saw family as a seating chart. The house moved into Elaine's name through a structure Patrick recommended. Our retirement accounts were updated. Insurance beneficiaries were corrected. The lake cabin in Erie County, the one Caleb loved as a kid, was placed in the trust too. None of it was done to hurt Sloan. It was done because I had finally understood her. A woman who tells the man funding her wedding to enjoy the night as a guest is not careless. She is testing the locks. 34 days after the wedding, she called. I was in my office at the shop, looking at winter maintenance schedules. The caller ID said Caleb. When I answered, Sloan's voice came through bright and smooth. Martin. Hi. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Not at all. We are finally getting settled after everything. Portugal was amazing. You and Elaine have to go someday. Lisbon is so charming. I've heard that. She laughed lightly, like we were friends who had misplaced only a small, unpleasant moment. Anyway, Caleb and I have been talking about next steps. We don't want to rent forever. And there's a new townhouse development outside Cranberry Township. It's close enough for Caleb's job. And honestly, it's a smart investment. Smart investments usually are. Exactly. So we're trying to move quickly before the good units are gone. I leaned back in my chair. She continued. We can manage the monthly payment. But the down payment is the obstacle. We were hoping you and Elaine might contribute $35,000. Not alone. Really. More like an early family gift. There it was. The first door after the wedding, the first hand on the next lock. Sloan. I said, do you remember what you said to me at the reception? Silence changed the room. What do you mean, table 12? You leaned down beside my chair and told me I was there as a guest. She exhaled. Not a sigh. A calculation. Martin. That was about seating. I didn't want any awkwardness. There was awkwardness. You just assigned it to me. I think you're taking this personally. I paid $63,870 for that room. Nobody asked you to keep a tally. No. I said, but you asked me to keep paying. She went quiet. I said, guests don't buy townhouses. Excuse me, guests bring serving bowls. Picture frames. Maybe a check and a card. Guests do not fund down payments. You were clear about my role at the wedding. I am going to respect it. You're serious. Completely. Caleb is going to be very upset. He has my number. I ended the call gently. Not with a slam. Not with a speech. Just the red button and the most peaceful silence I had felt in months. Caleb called that evening. I knew he would. He was angry in the way hurt. Sons get angry when they are not ready to admit they are hurt. Dad. What happened with Sloan? She asked me for $35,000. I said no. She said you humiliated her. On the phone in my office with nobody else listening, she said you threw the wedding in her face. I repeated what she told me at the wedding. He breathed hard. Dad. It was one seating thing. No. Caleb. The seating was the decoration. The sentence was the structure. You're punishing us. I'm setting a boundary. After paying for everything, now you want to control what happens next. I let that one sit because it hurt. Not because it was true, but because my son had said it in Sloane's language. Caleb. I said, I paid for your wedding because I love you. I did not buy authority over your marriage. I did not ask for authority, but I will not be treated like an invoice with hands and then called family when another bill appears. He said nothing. You and Sloane are welcome here for Sunday dinner. Elaine will make roast chicken. I will ask about work. I will not bring up the wedding unless you do. But the open wallet is closed. I am your father. Not a bank account wearing your last name. He hung up without saying goodbye. He came to dinner that Sunday alone. Elaine hugged him like nothing had happened because mothers understand doors differently than fathers do. I grilled chicken even though it was cold outside. We watched the Steelers lose a game they should have won and argued about the offensive line. Caleb laughed once, then looked guilty for laughing. I pretended not to notice. That is also fatherhood. Sloane did not take the no quietly. She called Elaine twice. The first time she cried. The second time she explained. According to her, I had been resentful from the beginning. I had used money to make myself important. I had embarrassed her by noticing where I was seated. I had turned a family gift into a weapon. 4 months after the wedding, Sloane made her second mistake. Her attorney sent a letter to Patrick. It suggested that because I had established a pattern of substantial financial support connected to the marital union, Caleb and Sloane had relied on continued assistance when making housing decisions. It asked for a formal accounting of wedding expenses and requested a conversation about reasonable family contribution expectations. Patrick emailed me the letter with one sentence. She is either badly advised or exactly herself. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed so hard. Denise came out of her office to see if I was choking. Patrick responded with a package thick enough to stop a door. It included every invoice, every check, every signed contract, every payment confirmation, and the final total. It also included a statement that the event in question had been planned, directed, and socially controlled by Mrs. Abel, Sloane Keller, who had personally identified Mr. Martin Keller as a guest. Therefore, Mr. Keller acknowledged no continuing obligation beyond the completed gifts already made. Patrick wanted to write it colder. I told him it was cold enough. 2 days later, Caleb came to the shop. He did not call first. He walked through the front door wearing the same expression he used at 16 when he backed Elaine's car into the mailbox. Did Sloane send a lawyer letter? He asked. Yes. I didn't know. I figured. His face changed when he realized I believed him. Dad, I swear I didn't know. I know. He sat in the chair across from my desk and put both hands over his face. For a minute he was not 30 years old. He was 10. And the world had gotten too large. She's been telling people you promised to help with a house. He said. Did I? No. Then there it is. He looked up. Why didn't you tell me about the letter? Because I was waiting to see whether you were part of it. That hurt him. I could see it. It hurt me too. I wasn't. He said. I believe you. He nodded. But his eyes were wet. She's not who I thought she was. There are moments when a father can win and lose at the same time. I had been right about Sloane. I would have given a great deal to be wrong. I am sorry. I said. He stared at me. You're not going to say it. Say what? That you told me so. I leaned back. Old. Not stupid. He laughed through his nose. Then he cried. Not loudly. Just enough for both of us to know it had happened. The separation did not happen immediately. People who have been manipulated do not walk out in one clean scene. They circle the door. They defend the person hurting them. They apologize for being confused. They mistake exhaustion for loyalty. Caleb spent 3 more months trying to save a marriage. Sloane treated like a negotiation she expected to win. 7 months after the wedding, Caleb came to Sunday dinner and did not touch his food. Elaine had made pot roast. On the same meal, Sloane criticized the first night we met her. Halfway through dinner, Caleb put down his fork. I think I made a mistake, he said. Elaine's hand went to her chest. Caleb looked at me. I married someone who liked what my family could provide more than she liked my family. No one spoke. He continued. And I let her make you small in a room you paid for. That sentence went through me harder than Sloane's ever had. I should have stood up. He said. Yes. I said. Elaine looked at me sharply. But Caleb nodded. I know. Then I said the part that mattered. But you are standing up now. He filed for separation 19 days later. It was not clean. Sloane accused him of abandonment, emotional betrayal, financial immaturity, and being controlled by his father. She told friends I had destroyed the marriage because I could not handle not being important. She told Grant that I had poisoned Caleb against her. Grant called me once during that period. The legal process took months. There was no house to divide because I had said no. There was no family business to reach because Patrick had locked the gate. There was no cabin, no inheritance, no informal promise. Just an apartment lease, a few pieces of furniture, and the unpleasant discovery that a wedding can cost more than a marriage lasts. I showed up for Caleb through all of it. I went with him to meet his lawyer. I helped him move into a 1-bedroom apartment in Wexford. Elaine stocked his freezer and cried in the car afterward. I brought him a used toolbox from the shop because every man living alone needs tools, even if all he can fix at first is a loose cabinet handle. The divorce was finalized 14 months after the wedding. Sloane became Sloane Whitaker again. Caleb kept his name, his job, his dough, and eventually, his sense of humor. He lost money, pride, sleep, and the illusion that being loved feels like being managed. That is a brutal education. But it is an education. Last Saturday, Caleb came to the house at 8 in the morning. We were replacing the back deck boards, a job I had postponed for 2 summers. Elaine made coffee. The dog stole one of Caleb's gloves and refused to negotiate. We worked until noon, ate sandwiches on the tailgate of my truck, then worked until the shadows stretched across the yard. At 4:30, we stacked the old boards by the garage. Caleb stood there looking at the house. The same house Sloane once called preserved, who the same house now protected in ways she would never touch. Thanks, he said, for the sandwich, for not giving up on me. I looked at my son. His hands were dirty. There was sawdust in his hair. He looked tired and real and more himself than he had in 2 years. I gave up on being used. I said, not on you. He nodded. Then he smiled a little. And thanks for not saying I told you so. I picked up a drill. I say it silently at least twice a week. He laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from the chest and not from manners. Elaine heard it from the kitchen and looked out the window. I saw her wipe her eyes with the dish towel. We sat on the tailgate as the sun went down behind the maple trees. The new deck board smelled like cut pine. The house lights came on one by one. Across the yard, the fence I had fixed a dozen times still leaned slightly at the far corner, waiting for another Sunday. I thought about table 12. I thought about the speaker blocking half my face in the wedding photos. I thought about Sloane leaning down in her perfect dress, telling me I was a guest, as if the word could shrink me. For a while, it did. I admit that. It made me smaller in my own mind for exactly as long as it took me to remember who built the room she wanted to exclude me from. Here is what I know now. Some people do not want family. They want access. They want the warmth of your history, the strength of your name, the balance in your accounts, and the benefit of your silence. But they do not want the obligations that come with belonging. They want your chair only after they have spent your check. Sloane Whitaker wanted a guest. She got one. A polite one. A quiet one. A guest who brought one final gift to her marriage, which was the word no. And that word bought back everything that mattered. My home. My peace. My wife sleeping without fear. My son sitting beside me with a beer in his hand and sawdust on his sleeves. The company I built from a van and a toolbox. The cabin by the lake. The right to decide where my work ends and someone else's entitlement begins. I paid for 236 people to watch my son get married. But I did not pay for the right to be disrespected forever. Not another check. Not another favor. Not another door opened by guilt. My name is Martin Keller. I was seated at table 12 in a room I paid for. I ate the salad. I smiled for the camera. I let the bride have her perfect day. Then I went home and made sure it was the last thing she ever got from me. If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe to Dad's Slyant Justice, and tell us in the comments where you are listening from. Sometimes subscribing is a small thing for you, but it helps us keep telling stories about fathers who stayed quiet just long enough for the truth to arrive.